Africa for Africans. The land of Africa is for Africans.
Today, the government of Libya announced the death of Muammar Gaddafi.
Did you know an African leader facilitated the assassination of Muammar Gaddafi? Who is this leader? And which country is he leading? Let's find out. The entire African continent was shocked on October 20, 2011, the day Colonel Muammar Gaddafi, the president of Libya, was announced dead. There were conflicting theories about what caused his death, which sparked much debate throughout the African continent as word of his passing spread. We will inform you about the African ruler that planned and approved of Gaddafi's assassination in this video. Former Libyan leader Muhammad Gadaffi was one of the continent's leaders who made a lasting impression. He lived a life of self-reinvention and is best known for advocating for the creation of the United States of Africa. Muhammad Gadaffi had lofty goals for both his nation and all of Africa, even after 40 years in office. Though love, money, and betrayal play a major role in his demise tale, the vision he had for Africa is still regarded as one of the greatest of the 21st century. Muhammad Gaddafi had a great deal of love for a certain nation, its citizens, and its president during his rule. In the end, though, it was this very president, the one he thought of as his friend, who had deceived him. So which country is this and who is its leader? This is Uganda, and the leader who betrayed Gaddafi was none other than the Ugandan leader who disseminated his treason. Uganda's President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni condemned the United States and the African Union in a 2016 letter for their interference in Libya and the wider Middle East. He added that it was not the place of the United States or the European Union to remove Saddam Hussein from Iraq or Gaddafi. However, why did Museveni turn his back on Gaddafi? Let's examine how they even became close to one another before delving deeply into the reason. How they grew close and the actual events that forced Museveni to betray his own friend. Gaddafi and Uganda had a relationship before Museveni took office. Gaddafi had known Uganda for a very long time. His bond with this nation, which he held in such high regard, dates back to the Idi Amin era of the 1970s. He gave this country a great deal of moral, financial, and military assistance during this time for Amin's government. Every time Idi Amin's regime came under threat, one guy would always step forward and provide military force to save him. Gaddafi was the only one in that situation. However, despite all of his kindness and support, he was ultimately betrayed, as you will soon discover. After facing several assaults and resistance, Idi Amin left the nation in 1979 and traveled to Libya, from where he eventually relocated to Saudi Arabia. In 1980, Uganda decided to hold elections to select a new leader following the toppling of Amin. Museveni would do what any other power-hungry individual would do because the outcome did not benefit him. He declared that it was unfair and that the elections had been manipulated. This led to a civil war between Museveni and the other opposition leaders in Uganda. During this conflict, Museveni and his army were lacking in both arms and ammunition. He would require assistance from a source. All he had to do was win this war. He was overly lustful for power. What then did he do? He needed to get assistance. He only asked the United States and the United Kingdom for arms assistance. Since he was close to Muhammad Gaddafi, his request was denied. He next traveled to Gaddafi, his nation's closest ally. Gaddafi never thought twice. Gaddafi provided all the assistance he required, provided him with military supplies, and he triumphed. Museveni nevertheless prevailed in the 1986 Ugandan civil war, which Gaddafi supported on multiple occasions. After Paul Kawanga Semajira was defeated, Museveni's military received training from Libya. In reality, Museveni drew inspiration for the name of his secret intelligence agency from those in Libya. That is the extent of Gaddafi's affection and backing for Museveni. Gaddafi traveled to Uganda often, leading one to believe that it was his second home. He made numerous infrastructure construction and investment in Uganda. Gaddafi invested in and purchased 51% of Uganda Telecom, the country's telecom company, and 60% of TriStar Limited, a textile company, through the Libyan African portfolio. Museveni was even persuaded by Gaddafi not to export Uganda's crude oil to the West and Europe. He assured him that he would assist in the construction of a refinery and pipes to Kenya and other nearby nations. But that wasn't all. Gaddafi also made enormous bets in Uganda's real estate and finance industries, investing in the Tropical Bank of Africa, National Housing Incorporated, Lake Victoria Hotel, and numerous other businesses. One other thing you should be aware of is that Gaddafi also provided funding to the RPF fighters through Museveni after they invaded Rwanda in 1980. He provided them with support, including weapons that the Museveni government flew into Uganda. Their bond was that deep, which is why the betrayal hurt much more. Let's also examine Gaddafi's involvement with the Tooro kingdom. In 2001, Muhammad Gadaffi became interested in this kingdom inside the borders of Uganda. King Oyo Member was just 9 years old at the time he ruled. Muhammad Gadaffi funded most of the improvements in this kingdom, including the building of the Tooro Palace, because of his deep affection for it. Gaddafi's influence on the Muslim population in Uganda is still felt today. He made a significant contribution to the building of the magnificent mosque there, which can accommodate at least 3,000 worshippers. The second largest mosque in Eastern Africa is this one. When Gaddafi visited Uganda, he even made jokes with Museveni, wanting to be ruled for life. He continued by questioning why he even bothered to run for office. During one of his visits, he gave one of Museveni's sons a military promotion from captain to major. Gaddafi helped President Museveni run for office in both the 2001 and 2006 presidential elections. That was not the case till the very end, despite how solid and indestructible their love appeared to be. Add your voice to Africa Unity by leaving a comment in the comments section below. And please subscribe to get notified when we upload videos about Africa Unity like this one. What spurred Museveni to remove Gaddafi in the first place? Like Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, Muhammad Gaddafi is, as you may already be aware, the most talked about figure whenever the concept of a United States of Africa is brought up. Gaddafi put a lot of work into bringing Africa together. Gaddafi was successful in persuading 45 heads of state to accept the establishment of an African Union, which took the place of the Organization of African Union during a summit that took place on January 19, 1989. After this, Gaddafi was the most well-liked supporter of this union for over a decade. He developed the concept of the United States of Africa, which he imagined would include a unified military and currency. Even back in 1989, he claimed that the African Union was to be the vehicle through which this ambition of his was realized. During Gaddafi's rule, almost 15% of the funds utilized to fund African Union initiatives originated in Libya. However, other African leaders believed that this would distort their stature, influence, and position within the continent, making it a frightening notion for Western powers. African authorities disagreed with the proposal on this point. Unexpectedly, Yoweri Museveni opposed this notion as well. Gaddafi had previously aided Museveni greatly and even helped him ascend to great power in Uganda. He had contributed greatly to his nation and supported him during difficult times. For what reason did Museveni reject Gaddafi's proposal to establish the United States of Africa? Initially, it posed a challenge to his authority in Uganda. He was flattering in his appreciation of Gaddafi's perspective, but he did not genuinely challenge the course. He would not submit to another leader's authority. Either he or nobody else will be involved. Second, Museveni's influence was growing in the area, and in this role, By taking military action in nations like Somalia, he advanced Western interests. He also gave the CIA commanders intellectual support. By doing this, he put the interests of the West ahead of those of his fellow Africans. Museveni angrily rejected this decision when it was eventually brought up at an African Union conference in Accra, Ghana, in 2007. He was afraid that endorsing the notion of African unification would lead to conflicts with the Western countries. He knew that these guys were the ones who maintained him in authority, and that they might remove him at any time. Museveni was also worried about the consequences of abandoning Gaddafi, both financially and militarily. He was well aware that opposing Gaddafi was far simpler than opposing the West. The responses from Museveni hastened Gaddafi's downfall. On June 13, 2008, Museveni gave his approval to Jende Fraser, the Assistant Secretary General of State for African Affairs, during his son's graduation ceremony in the United States. He claimed that because of language and cultural divides, he did not think a united Africa was required. He continued by alleging that Gaddafi bought off minor African nations to lend his support and prevented them from speaking up at African Union and other international gatherings. Museveni warned that if relations with Gaddafi continue to escalate, his plane may be attacked while it is in international airspace. He asked the United States of America for assistance, and they granted it to him. Gaddafi was more concerned about Museveni's standing in Uganda than his connections with the United States. Museveni's administration perceived Gaddafi's 2008 surprise visit to Uganda as a planned assassination attempt on their president. In a 37-minute speech at an Arab youth gathering in Uganda, Gaddafi changed his direction, stating that he would now prefer to collaborate with traditional leaders rather than elected presidents in order to realize his goals for an African United States. He convened a group of traditional African leaders in 2009 to talk about the continent's unification. Museveni prevented Ugandan traditional leaders from attending the gathering after learning of this. Gaddafi was persuaded by Museveni that George Bush, the US president at the time, had lifted sanctions against Libya and would invest in his nation if Gaddafi dismantled his weapons of mass destruction. Gaddafi was informed by British diplomats that Museveni had sold him alive after their discussions. The worst error that ultimately brought Gaddafi to his demise was this: he lacked a potent nuclear bomb capable of wiping out NATO forces. Since then, Museveni has made an effort to follow in Gaddafi's footsteps and promote financial and security unification among African nations. Although he has certain strengths, he lacks the financial resources and charisma necessary to complete this mission. Even if he succeeds, he might not get support. The West won't for the same reason they opposed Gaddafi. Museveni stated in a speech in 2021 that the Western powers had limited goals. And ironically, these are the same individuals to whom he had sold Gaddafi. 2 years after his overthrow, the mosque that had been constructed in Uganda and called the Gaddafi Mosque was renamed in order to placate the local administration. Given that Gaddafi was the only African leader Museveni truly feared, the only thing he could have done was refrain from using blackmail against him. There is no doubt that no one will be there to save Museveni when the time comes for him to relinquish power. Here is where we wrap off our look at the man who betrayed Muhammad Gaddafi. Tell us what you think in the comments section below. Do not forget to like and share for more informative videos like this one. Thanks for watching.